Hello, this is Amy Litzinger, and welcome to the Continuing Advisory Committee. I am your chair for today. It is August 21st, 2024, and we have lots to do today because our plan is to review and approve our legislative report, which I'm very excited about. Would you like to go over the meeting logistics, Stephanie?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. Could you stop sharing your screen just for a second so I could share?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Everyone should be seeing the CAC members' duties. This is always included in the agenda, but just to go over this briefly. Number one, advise TEA of unmet needs within the state and the education of children with disabilities. Number two, comment publicly on any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities. Number three, advise TEA in developing evaluations and reporting on data to the secretary under section 618 of the Act. Number four, advise TEA in developing corrective action plans to address findings identified in federal monitoring reports under Part B of the Act. Number five, advise TEA in developing and implementing policies relating to the coordination of services for children with disabilities. And number six, advise TEA in setting standards related to significant disproportionality determination. So for this morning, what we're going to do, our agenda is seen right here. We have our welcome and our opening, which we just did. And then we'll have updates from TA, and then we'll have public comments. Anybody wanting to make a public comment should notify Amy if you're in person, or if you're in line, if you want to put that in the notes to let me know in chat. And you need to sign up between 9 and 9:30. And then we'll move on with the legislative report subcommittees updating and voting on the report. We'll review and approve the minutes, discuss, recommend, and take possible action on current minutes and future meeting topics, set future meeting date, and then adjourn. So that is our agenda for today. So if you don't mind, I would like to ask the TEA folks to go first. Actually, it's Kristen McGuire, who is here with us this morning. And for those of you that don't know, Kristen is the Deputy Associate Commissioner of Special Populations Policy Integration and Technical Assistance. So welcome, Kristen. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate you guys having me here. I typically come on here to just give some updates from the agency related to our initiatives or rulemaking in this case. So I wanted to just share a little bit about some commissioner rules and one State Board of Education rule that has become effective. So let me try to get my screen shared here. All right. I think you're seeing. Let me get into slideshow mode. All right. Okay, so just did want to talk through some administrative code updates. So you are aware, I've been talking for the last several meetings about some rule changes that were coming, or proposed rule changes that were coming. So we are starting to have those become effective. So first thing, of course, is the State Board of Education did adopt their changes to their rule around dyslexia, as well as updated their dyslexia handbook. So that rule was effective June 30th of 2024. which makes the handbook also effective June 30th of 2024. We just recently, a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, posted an agency kind of FAQ around handbook implementation. So that is on the dyslexia webpage as well. So I encourage you to check that out. If you, August 9th is when we published that. So if you want to review that, you can review that as well. Several rule changes in the commissioner rules. Rule changes that were effective July 23rd were 3 sections. 1049 is about parental rights regarding adult students. This was primarily just deletion of outdated text, so no substantive changes there. 89-1065 is around extended school year services. And that is the changes there were mostly clarification, but there was a provision in the previous rule that, essentially said if ESY is, if extended school year services are not discussed at the annual ARD committee meeting, then a parent could, ask for that later. And so we've, kind of switched that requirement to require the conversation at the annual. And then, of course, if evidence shows later that a student qualifies, then the ARD committee would need to act accordingly. Also, a provision added that if a student withdraws from one district and enrolls in another and ESY is required in their IEP, the new district is responsible for making sure those services are provided. 89-1141 is about our education service center leadership. This no huge kind of substantive changes. This was mainly sort of deletion of text that is already covered in the education code or was already covered in kind of grant guidelines. And so it wasn't absolutely necessary for rule. Quite a few changes in our initial evaluation and our eligibility.
I can't figure out how to get my sound to work.
Quite a few changes in our evaluation rule and in our eligibility criteria rule. First one up, 89-1011, which is the full individual and initial evaluation. When you do get this deck, I did want to mention that, so the link to the rules is embedded here on the slide. So when you do get this deck, you're able to go to the rule itself, but these are just kind of some summaries of those changes. So it does require, so one of the bills that came out of last session, House Bill 3928, which was primarily relating to dyslexia, it required a form to be developed by the agency that discussed rights under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that may differ from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and other kind of disability discrimination protections. So that became what we refer to as the overview of special education for parents form. So what we have changed in rule at 89-1011 is that form is required not just for suspicions of dyslexia, excuse me. That is required for all suspicions of disabilities. So basically in all referral paperwork, that form would be included. There's a change in the rule that if the 30th calendar day, so there is a requirement, of course, we have a statutory requirement in relation to the evaluation timeline. And then there is also a requirement that the initial ARD committee meeting be held no later than the 30th calendar day after the evaluation report is completed. There was a change in the rule if the 30th calendar day falls during the summer, that the ARD committee must meet not later than the 15th school day. That used to be by the first day of school, and why, of course, we would encourage that. We do have a 5 school day prior written notice, so doing that by the first day of school is not always possible. We did add a new requirement that parents must be provided a copy of the evaluation report as soon as possible after completion of the report, but no later than 5 school days prior to that initial ARD committee meeting. In the eligibility criteria rule, so 89-1040, within the autism section, this isn't, new, but there was public comment asking to kind of clarify or sort of remind the reader through rule that determination of autism under IDEA is not the same, obviously, as a medical diagnosis. And so a school district cannot require also a medical diagnosis of autism. And then in the federal regulations, there is a list of other characteristics that are often associated with autism. And so the absence of those other characteristics does not automatically exclude a student from eligibility. So mainly just kind of, clarifying additions there. Deaf blindness is a minor wording change, nothing substantive. Deaf or hard of hearing does have a substantive change in that we no longer will require the ontological evaluation. There are some eligibility requirements for children under 3, because in the state of Texas, of course, students who have a visual impairment or who are deaf and hard of hearing are eligible for public school services from birth. So that is added there because there were some thoughts that we were kind of covering the school age definition and not the definition that would work for ECI, for your early childhood intervention. One of the things in emotional disturbance, although that is called emotional disturbance under the federal regulations, we have updated our rule that we will now refer to that disability as emotional disability. No changes to eligibility criteria itself, but we will start referring to that disability as emotional disability. No changes for intellectual disability, and then multiple disabilities is more changes to align better with the federal definition. A couple of changes under orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, and also traumatic brain injury is to just clarify the kind of medical diagnosis or confirmation of the issue for disability determination. Specific learning disability, again, because of that House Bill 3928 and the State Board of Education's changes, we have made some changes here in specific learning disability to kind of add references to dyslexia and dysgraphia, and of course, the provisions in law that require certain members to be a part of that decision. I mentioned traumatic brain injury and then visual impairment. We added criteria for the child under 3, similar to what we did for deaf and hard of hearing. So one of the big changes that is also made in this rule is that the federal regulations allow states to use a term called developmental delay. It is, of course, used in the early childhood intervention ages. But as far as your, once they hit 3 years of age, states are allowed to use a disability category of developmental delay. If a state chooses to use it, they can't require a school district to use it. However, if a school district uses it, they have to match the state's definition and criteria, obviously. So in the rule at 89-1040, Texas has traditionally not used developmental delay. We have, however, had kind of a separate eligibility category that was referred to as non-categorical early childhood, or NCEC. We have decided to start transitioning over to developmental delay. And so that is happening within the next couple of years. So developmental delay in that rule is defined. The age range for that will be age 3 to 9, because that is what is allowed in the federal regulations. And then as of the 25-26 school year, that's when NCEC must no longer be used, with the exception, of course, of those who start the school year already as NCEC and then have to be reevaluated by age 6. So the difference with NCEC is it's just 3 through 5. Our developmental delay will end up being 3 through 9. But this, it's important to remember, this is not just an equivalent switch. It's not just changing the term. It's a completely different definition of eligibility. So we will take this year, of course, to create a lot of technical assistance around that to be able to give districts ahead of that 25-26 school year. And so here's the definition that you can read when you get that slide deck. All right, 1050 is the Admission Review and Dismissal Committee. Couple of changes here of, again, the dyslexia professional that's required to be part of the RE committee. There were also some provisions in this rule that were more appropriate at 1055 under the individualized education program, so we did move some of those. In 1055, we added information about measurable annual goals, so what the expectations and requirements are around that. Adding a requirement that if a student qualifies and is eligible for STAR Alternate 2 participation, that the form that the agency provides for that is a required part of the IEP. Some edits to the section describing the autism supplement, mainly wording changes, nothing hugely substantive, but important. IEP, if a student is identified with SLD, the specific learning disability of dyslexia or related disorders, of course, the IEP must also be developed and implemented in accordance with the dyslexia handbook and the rule. We have some state we have some state requirements that are for transition that are required by age 14. And there were in existence a couple of federal requirements that are required by age 16. And so this particular rule changes it aligns both the federal and the state transition requirements to 14, so that there's no longer kind of two age ranges for a transition. So that will hopefully help the transition run more seamlessly and be helpful for students. There are some changes in relation to students who register over the summer months. So essentially those who have IEPs and who withdraw from one district, transfer over to another district, there are some kind of new requirements in relation to implementing their IEP. And then 89-1131, qualifications of special education related service and paraprofessional personnel. This primarily adds that dyslexia provider of dyslexia instruction. Within the education code, it does not require a provider of dyslexia instruction to be special ed certified. Then we have another round of rules that are about to be effective on August 22nd. So 89-1001 scope and applicability. Biggest change here is that child find activities for residential facilities is moving from an annual requirement to a minimum twice a year requirement. 89-1005 around instructional arrangements and settings. The intent with this is to align our rule with statute as well as the student attendance accounting handbook. And then 1075 on general program requirements, mostly just clarifying, except we did add the existing requirement for the transition and employment designee to complete required training. Interventions and sanctions, this is primarily cross-reference citation changes as well as clarifying language. referral for the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and Texas School for the Deaf. This rule in 1085 is clarifying, there's a definition essentially of a resident school district for purposes of that rule and the next rule that we'll talk about. And this is clarifying that if the student was enrolled in an open enrollment charter school, that they would be the resident school district. So in terms of transportation, this is where that matters, of course. So resident school district is responsible for transportation from TSBVI or TSD at the beginning and end of school terms, as well as regularly scheduled holidays. And then the last two in this batch are 1092 and 1094. This one is the contracting for non-public residential placements. So fairly significant rewrite of this one, just to make sure we're aligning between, obviously our current guidance that we issue, as well as within each rule. So 1092 is about residential and 1094 is about day placements. So so I encourage you to read those revisions as well if you are involved in those types of placements. So those are effective August 22nd, which is tomorrow. So again, when you get the slide deck, if you start looking around today on those, of course, the new text that's linked here won't be visible until tomorrow when the administrative code, the Secretary of State changes the language. Last few things, just SSES, many of you are familiar, the Supplemental Special Education Services Program. We have just changed in operation terms the name of the program of Parent-Directed Special Education Services, just to kind of more predominantly highlight what it really is. So Parent-Directed Special Education Services, we have changed some rule around that program. Criteria or eligibility hasn't changed, of course. It's still a one-time grant within the statute for $1,500. There are still some ARD committee requirements in that. We did institute an application window starting this year and so that will help us not only prioritize who we are legally required to prioritize, but also will help this kind of process of some were on waiting lists and some were kind of hanging on for a long time. So now this is still up subject to appropriations. So it is quite possible and quite likely that when this new application opens on February 3rd, 2025, we may run out of funds for the biennium because there was only a set amount that was given. All right, last thing I think for me, I know I've talked a lot. We have several more rules coming down the pike here, and then that should be kind of the bulk of our rule changes. Of course, until session, we do have a couple of more, but we are looking to gather some stakeholder input prior to issuing proposed amendments for those. So have some of September, October, and November expected effective dates. And I think that is it for me. So let me see, I'm sure we might have some questions. All right, anybody have any questions for me or anything you want me to clarify?
Well, we have a quiet group this morning.
I guess so. That's about it for me, other than just wanted to let you know, obviously I think you guys have talked before, potentially in your meetings about SHARS, which is school health and related services through Medicaid. There have been some changes within that process. So the Health and Human Services Commission manages that program. We, obviously coordinate and work with them as well on it, but they are kind of the primary managers of that program, because of course it is a Medicaid program. So there have been some changes. There are some potential rule changes as well, I think in October. So as we continue to learn more and then get more information from HHSC, we are starting to collaborate quite a bit with them. So hopefully at your next meeting, I can have some more updates. Potentially, if requested, we could ask for someone from HHSC to come as well. So if that's something that you
I
would
was
like
going to
talk about.
suggest that, so thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'll work on that to see if we can get that for next meeting. I did also, just before I close out, want to just let you guys know that we have, so one of course, the conversations and legislation last session did discuss and include some special education funding reform provisions around kind of a service intensity model. And what we are doing ahead of next session is we are asking districts to kind of help us collect some data about a kind of hypothetical service intensity model to just give us something, some data to be able to give to lawmakers if that topic comes back up next session. So that is something we just kind of sent to a group of districts this week, is to ask for their participation. And so I can give you an update of that next meeting as well. So I think
Yes,
that's
please.
all I have, unless anybody has any questions for me.
So Kristen, will you send that deck to me and then I'll send it out to all the members? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I
Thank
will
you
do
very
that.
much. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for being here this morning. We always appreciate your time.
Of course, absolutely. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you. So, okay, Amy, I think with that, we can move on to public comment. I'd like you to know that Catherine Harwood is here virtually and has requested to make a public comment. And then Stephen Alleman has emailed me something that he wanted distributed to all of the members, which I just did. And I think he's going to hop on to make a public comment, but he is not on yet. So
He is here in person.
perfect. Awesome. So, okay. I don't know the order that you want to follow. Catherine did make her request within the time frame, but if you had people earlier, you make that decision who you would like to go first.
Let's go ahead and have virtual go first.
Okay, so that would be Catherine. Catherine, would you like to come off mute and make your public comment, please?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Catherine Harwood. I'm a PhD student in social work, but I'm here representing myself as a self-advocate. I have neurological disabilities, including cerebral palsy. I'm working on a bill based on my own lived experiences. The bill is about promoting safety for students with disabilities who have feeding and swallowing disorders in Texas public schools. And I experienced a myriad of health problems resulting from having a poor swallow. I've struggled my entire life with significant gastrointestinal motility concerns, socially awkward drooling, inattentiveness, dehydration, problems with absences from school. I've had accumulating dental issues like impacted canines, damage to my jaw joint. I've had incountable painful near aspiration episodes where food would almost get into my lungs. I was over 20 pounds underweight and, like I said, absent a lot from school. And growing up like this was very difficult. It the feeding and swallowing problems remain diagnosed and untreated. Because of my limited ability to chew, it was a small miracle I didn't choke on my school lunch. These challenges were not diagnosed or addressed until my 20s. And then it took years to find a specialist. In my case, it was a speech language pathologist, but it could be an OT or a nurse or a variety of members from an interdisciplinary team who pieced the symptoms together. And I just was frustrated with all these preventable health struggles that I've endured. And I felt relief when I had answers, a diet plan, and safe eating strategies. I'm grateful I can live a more comfortable life, and I've been sick and I want to prevent similar complications to other kids going forward. Um, so drafting a bill, and I thank you for your consideration in adding this to the recommendations for the TEI, and can I answer any questions?
I have a question, Catherine.
Sure.
Thanks for sharing your experience. I really appreciate hearing that. What would it, if you think about what would it ideally look like in the school setting? Like what would you like to see a student have granted in the school setting?
The capacity for a referral to be made to like an interdisciplinary swallowing team, and for there to be an observation, and for there to be particularly some safe diet modifications made, and for this to be added to the IEP. Most of the lion's share of the students who are getting really sick and having absences and like medical complications from feeding and swallowing disorders already have existing disabilities like a Down syndrome or CP or dysautonomia or something of that nature.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I have a question as well. That by the way. So did you have someone in the community, like a healthcare provider, send a prescription or something to school for that to be done, or your expectation that they just recognize that and it just be made part of the IEP?
Okay, this isn't quite my area of expertise, but as far as I'm aware, speech language pathologists are pathologists and clinicians, and they themselves can operate without a doctor's prescriptions. If it was an OT, I believe they might need a doctor's prescription. And then I don't know what the jurisdiction of someone like a school nurse or a school psychologist who can also suspect a feeding disorder. I don't know what their like licensure requirement would be like for that.
Well, some of it isn't a licensure requirement, but an insurance requirement. If insurance is gonna pay for it, they need a prescription. I don't know if that's the case with school funding. So we're gonna have to do some research on that. Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for your public comment. Amy, do you want to take it from here since folks are in the room?
Yes, Stephen, would you like to go next?
I would. How would you like me to do it? Just speak from here or move or?
I think the room microphone will find you as you start speaking.
All right. Well, I'm assuming everyone online can hear me. I'm Stephen Alman from Disability Rights Texas. Disability Rights Texas is the protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. And this includes, of course, us monitoring school-wide issues for students with disabilities in our great state. Today I'm speaking to the CAC about a new policy report issued by Disability Rights Texas. I have shared by email a link to the report in full, and hopefully you can access that. If not, just simply check out our website, and it's posted under our education tab. The topic of the report is segregated schools and shadow campuses for students with disabilities in Texas. By segregated schools, we examined public schools in Texas where at least 90% of students in attendance have disabilities. So these are very isolated, segregated settings for students with disabilities. We also examined what we call shadow campuses. Shadow campuses are not technically instructional campuses in Texas. They are, they basically fall through a loophole which we believe should be closed, because without them being considered an instructional campus, lots of important public data and transparency are lost. So in short, we found that for these segregated schools and shadow campuses, they are overwhelmingly male. Students with autism are significantly overrepresented, and many of the students at these schools are near the end of their public school career. In short, we have several recommendations. They include, among other things, ensuring a pathway back to less restrictive settings for these students, so that they don't remain in these very segregated settings for the rest of their school career. That there's emphasis on training for staff, because one of the other issues we discovered is that there is a over-reliance on restraint techniques in these schools. So restraint prevention, de-escalation seems to be a necessary skill set for school staff to minimize restraints. And finally, we wish to close the loophole for shadow campuses so that they don't remain in the shadows. That is, that there's public transparency about what happens in these public schools, and that parents have just as much information about them as any other regular campus through our A to F campus rating system. I'll conclude there. Again, please refer to the report for much more detail and information. And of course, Disability Rights Texas is always available either to the committee or any committee members to answer questions. Thank you.
I have a question, Stephen. Is that report available yet to the general public, and where do we find it to send people to it?
Great question. So yes, the report has now been made public. It is posted on our Disability Rights Texas website. The email message I sent has a link in it to the report, but I'm happy to send it to you directly, Amy, happy, of course, for anyone to share it. We'll be speaking about it with state lawmakers and legislative aides, of course, as well as, I should note, I do appreciate that Kristen McGuire and her team has already taken a meeting with us about our reported findings, and we appreciate the attention that TEA has already given to this topic of segregated schools and shadow campuses.
Are there any other questions? Okay. So now we are going to work on our legislative report. This is very exciting. We're very close to the end to routing our report officially. So first thing we're going to talk about is digital access. Erin, do you have anything to share with us?
I do, want to make sure I'm coming through on the audio. And then, Amy, assuming I am, you want me to go ahead and share with the
Yeah.
committee, on screen?
It's just a little hard for us to hear Aaron, just so you
Yes.
know.
Am I coming through there now? Or are we getting a lot of feedback to the room?
Yeah, we can't hear you, Aaron.
Amy, do you know where the microphone is?
Well, the owl was
Yeah.
sitting here. So.
Maybe I would close to that. Stephanie, am I coming through better now?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. So based on past discussions, the digital literacy and accessibility section of our report, we had previously recommended that we continue with the 3 recommendations that were in our previous report with updates based on committee input as well as information that that we've been able to collect through various research activities since then. So these will look a little familiar in general, but there are some notable edits. I'm just going to hit the highlights on this. I've shared this with Kevin and Claudia and Tara, as well as Amy previously. We can, as I said, I'll just hit the highlights and focus really on what the policy recommendation is and less on the background and conclusion, since the policy recommendation is really what we're doing as the committee itself. And so the first one is related to accessible digital technology policy. And so recommend that TEA should require through administrative rule that every local education agency adopt or review and revise as needed a digital accessibility policy that includes, and this 3 of these 5 bullets are carryovers from last time, which is a statement of purpose and the scope of policy. The next 3 were revised in some way. So conformance standards aligned with the state of Texas practice, that's new. And the state of Texas is meant to be vague there, but generally speaking would follow the DIR accessibility standards, and what the is done through state agencies based on that, following that lead. Persons or roles accountable for compliance. Previously, we had just said accountability for compliance. So specifically saying it doesn't have to be a person or a role, but some specifying who's ultimately accountable in some way, shape, or form. And then one thing we wanted to add is reasonable timelines for implementation and remediation. So obviously implementing accessibility in the first place should have an expectation for when that happens. But we know not everything's perfect and remediation needs to happen from time to time, and there should be a reasonable timeline for doing that. At minimum, the scope should include, and these are the same as before, so electronic documents, audiovisual materials, mobile apps, and web-based content. And
the wrap up of that recommendation, whether used as primary, secondary, supplementary material, the policy must also address procurement of in-scope materials from third parties. That is the same as before. The main difference with the background here is a bunch of new resources were added for reference. These were resources either provided by TEA to us, or in a lot of cases, especially this bullet list, resources provided by the committee to TEA to help with background and guidance on adoption. Recommendation in the old, in the previous report, recommendation 15, again, saying the same. We'll see what's numbered in this forthcoming one, but self-paced resources for digital accessibility barrier remediation. And so this is specific to some input we've gotten before and a continuation of the last one, but with a little bit more detail, particularly in the background and conclusion section, but recommending TA should identify at minimum the top 5 most critical barriers to accessibility of digital materials used with students, and TA or qualified designees should create, procure, or identify self-paced materials that faculty and staff can use in the assessment of the level of accessibility and how to remediate if that's necessary. And for each barrier to create self-guided training, not to exceed 15 minutes. We wanted this to be, not hours and hours of training. Obviously, faculty and staff have a lot of other things to do, and providing a job aid or checklist to assist them with helping them identify the current level of accessibility and if any remediation is necessary. We know there are some resources. TA staff had pointed us to some third-party materials that were highlighted in a fairly recent newsletter that went out. So we know that some of that is there. That's an example of what could be done. Certainly when you're identifying third-party content you have no sort of direct relationship with, you have no control over if and when that changes or if and when that stays available. But that is certainly an example of how this recommendation could be addressed. And then the third recommendation, promoting proficiency with the correct and consistent use of accessible and assistive technology. And this is specific to recommending TA should establish and make ready available to all LEAs a template of procedures and resources to art committees when assistive technology and or built-in accessibility features are an integral part of the IEP, and that sufficient training or other support resources are provided to the student, their support network, and the faculty and staff to work toward ultimately achieving proficiency with the accessible and assistive technology, whether it's being used in the school setting or at home for their schoolwork. And this is really this is not specific to any one disability, but really to address some previous feedback about accessible technology, whether it's built-in accessible technology or assistive technology, as that's defined, either assistive technology device or services, that these were necessarily maybe being identified as part of an IEP, but not necessarily providing the adequate support and resources, maybe because the folks within the art committee and the students support network themselves don't necessarily understand to a full extent how to make the best, most efficient and use of those accessible or assistive technology. So really wanting to make sure that TEA can provide the LEAs, or at least give the LEAs some resources for them to create some resources to help with this. We've previously gotten we got a presentation about some training resources TEA is contracted with the Assistive Technology Industry Association to provide. The Texas 4-step model, I think, came out since our last set of policy recommendations as being a good foundation in terms of material to educate what is assistive technology, specifically devices versus services and so forth. And so this is, those are really good places to start, packaging that up and providing that to LEAs so that it makes its way down to the individual art committees, and they feel empowered to support the student and make sure that or do their best they can to help ensure that the student can use these assistive and accessible technologies proficiently to be able to accomplish their schoolwork. So those are the three updated recommendations related to the digital literacy and accessibility section of our report. Any comments, questions, feedback, thoughts?
Could you please share that with me? Because I want to put the 3 recommendations on the meeting notes.
Sure. I'll forward that over to you, Janie. If there's nothing else, I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Speaking of Janie, would you like to update us on staffing?
Yes, hold on. I'm trying to do both. Okay, the staffing recommendations is that I'm making, I know that a lot of school districts are already have a shortage of teachers, but it is especially so when it comes to staffing self-contained units and resource units. And one of the reasons is that there's currently no student-teacher ratio. So there's a lot of school districts that really have it set to where that's not a problem. Unfortunately, there's school districts that have self-contained units with very large amount of numbers. And this creates, especially when it comes with different grade levels. For example, I know of a particular teacher that was amazing, a special education self-contained teacher. She had 19 students from pre-K 3 to 6th grade. She had test levels from 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th for test levels and only 2 8s. And right now, the staffing teacher ratio, since there's none, there's a state average of 15 students per 1 teacher, but that's not always the case. And this creates burnout in teachers. So my recommendation, the group recommendation, is that if you have a teacher-student ratio, it will limit the number of students. I mean, if we're dealing with, even in the resource classroom, if you have 18, 19 students in the resource classroom, that's basically almost a general education classroom, which doesn't benefit the students receiving resource or students in the self-contained unit. Especially because there's no consideration as far as need. Some students require in the self-contained unit require more assistance than others. And honestly, one of the things that I noticed in during fire drills, when you have to see a teacher or an aide pushing 2 wheelchairs at the single time, there's no safety in that. So it's imperative that we look at the needs of the students and also smaller classroom or implement some sort of classroom teacher ratio. The other one is incentivize teachers that work with students with disability. I know that some school districts I mean, I think there's an average of $200 more to, I think it was $12,000. That's great, but that's at the district discretion. And when we're having such a shortage, I think that funding from the state to specifically go to these teachers is necessary to ensure that we have teachers that will stay, because honestly, money is a big factor too. You have so many responsibilities, but yet are not getting paid in what you're doing. You know, I think it's easier for some teachers just to transfer to another job or even go into general ed classrooms. Because TIA doesn't always fall under this. I know that there were cases where school districts that the teacher incentive allotment didn't cover resource teachers, dyslexic teachers, or even self-contained classroom teachers. My third recommendation is to implement a grant program for current teachers that want to get certified in special education. I think that we last cycle it was for teacher aides, but I think there are a lot of teachers, general education teachers, that didn't get certified in special education. So even if I wanted to go and get certified, honestly, you know, with such a tight budget, it's very difficult for most people to do that. So a grant program would give these teachers that are already in the classrooms, that already have teaching experience, the opportunity to get certified in special education. Those are the three recommendations that we have so far. I've already shared the link, and if other people would want to include, that's great. But those are the three that I think are very important, right?
Just to remind y'all, we are officially voting today, and then the formatting committee will help to format. And also, before we vote, we can add to the background and conclusion as a group as well. Okay, April,
Hi.
are you ready to talk about behavior?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just, if you share, let me share the screen, I will share and talk through. Okay, can y'all see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
so for us, in our conversations along the way, most of our conversations go back to one general recommendation to start off with, which is to recommend that all staff working with students engage in de-escalation training prior to the start of the school year or within 30 days of the start of the school year or the hire date. And then we have some stipulations in once for all staff, but twice per year for staffs in the behavior programs. This is to prevent unnecessary escalation of behaviors and restraints to increase the safety for students and staff in schools. So just that overall recommendation. Recommendation 2, what comes up a lot is just the need for someone with that expertise in a district. So provide the requirement with the funding for a behavior specialist or somebody of that equivalent certification for each LEA. And so I have here a minimum of 1, but also obviously there needs to be variations based off of student population, special ed population, and the needs of the districts. But that continues to come back in all of the surveys and things from districts that we see, which is they just don't have the expertise to deal with some of these behavioral needs. And then 3 kind of goes in line with what Janie was talking about, which was implementation of a grant program for attraction and retention for those that would like to go into special education as it relates to behavior, but also some incentives for the current teachers and paras working in the special ed behavior classrooms. Those classrooms, we are seeing unprecedented openings in those, and people are not staying. And so finding ways to increase the ability for those to stay in there. And then so for background, so for staff shortages, it showed that staff shortages have led to an increase in non-certified staff working with students. So in a TEA report to the House Public Committee on August 13th, TEA shared that 34% of new hires in 2024 were uncertified in Texas. So this leads to teachers entering the classrooms unprepared and not trained to handle behavior concerns. And then we also have in here the disability rights report about, in that report that Steve Olivan just shared, that 90% of restraints involved a student with disability, despite only representing 9.8% of the total student population that year. So basically really affirming the fact that we need more training for working with students with disabilities. I also have requested information from Dr. O'Neill about the current restraint data. And as soon as I get that, I will drop that in there. But I did do a placeholder of just pulling in the data that was in our prior report, just so we would know kind of what that information would look like. But mainly we're just looking, we know that we've had informally discussed from TEA about the increase in complaints from districts as it relates to restraint. So I'm just waiting for that exact number and I will drop that in there. So any questions or clarifications or anything that anyone would like me to add or change or anything like that?
In recommendation 1, maybe this needs to be in the background, or maybe it needs to be in the recommendation, but some reference to the idea that not all students with behavior needs are students with identified disabilities. And that all students have behavior, it's just certain types of behavior that we're referring to. I don't know. But that's an idea and sort of a question of, in the background, it might be nice to sort of define our scope of which students are we talking about and which behaviors are we talking about.
For sure. And that's a really great point, Amy. I know from mine, I kept it from the perspective of students with disabilities as far as like special ed, but you bring up a great point in that a lot of the behavior specialists in districts have begun to be split funded so that they can help with the gen ed population as well, or the kids who are, possibly in the child find process and those sort of things. So I will put a note here so we can maybe talk about what that looks like. Okay, anything else? Okay. Well, if anybody thinks of any changes, just let me know. I'm also happy to share the document with whoever would like to add to it. Okay. Thank you.
Can you share with Janie so she can put them in the minutes?
Yes, I think I have already, but Janie, let me know if you need it.
Yes, can you share it? Because I want to make sure that I get the correct language in the minutes for the recommendations.
Yes, ma'am.
I also had some notes about behavior plans and positive behavior intervention supports that we probably need to make an allusion to those in sort of the opposite of like what do we plan to do instead of restraints, to highlight that, but maybe that's in the background and not necessarily a recommendation.
For sure, I can drop that down. Were you thinking any specific recommendation along those that you're thinking?
Just that well, it kind of goes with the escalation training. We could lump it in that one, that part of the escalation training is positive behavior supports as well.
Perfect. I put a little note at the bottom so we can make sure to get that included.
Okay. So dyslexia is next.
Tara, can you share that one? Please? Thank you.
Okay, sorry guys, let me try to, okay, I have that on my share screen. Okay, can y'all see my screen? Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Thanks, Erin. All right. So recommendation number 1, it's recommended that TA provide a list of evidence-based dyslexia programs for instruction. Recommendation number 2, recommend that class size for dyslexia instruction be limited to tier 3 small group instruction. So limiting size. And then recommendation number 3, recommend that funding for dyslexia grant programs similar to grants offered from 2022 to 2024, extra 2 there, that provide training for school teachers that are interested in becoming trained in evidence-based dyslexia programs. So more money. The background is, although many school districts have excellent dyslexia departments, there are still many school districts throughout Texas with infancy dyslexia departments that need direction to ensure all aspects of effective intervention are met. Not all dyslexia resources available to school districts require explicit instruction. In some web-based dyslexia resources, students take placement tests and are taught many lessons based on skills. The teacher conducts the lesson on the skills the student is struggling with. These programs lack multisensory structured literacy instruction. According to the Dyslexia Handbook 2024 update, evidence-based dyslexia instruction provides evidence-based multisensory structured literacy instruction for students with dyslexia. This instruction must be explicit, systematic, and intentional in its approach. This instruction is designed to likely take place in a small group setting. Multi-tiered systems of support is a framework that focuses on intervention, best practices within the areas of academics, behavior, and social emotion supports for the whole child. Tiers are based on student need and increase the level of support provided as a student moves from classroom wide to targeted and intensive interventions. Tier 1 includes high-quality classroom-wide instruction and support for all. Tier 2 provides targeted support to address students' gaps in skills, and Tier 3 involves intensive support, usually provided more often in smaller groups. Unfortunately, some school districts are grouping all students receiving dyslexia instruction and creating a class to provide dyslexia for all in those different tiers. Due to shortages of teachers trained in dyslexia instruction, some schools group all of the students together and create a classroom for dyslexia instruction. The dyslexia teachers are often asked to travel to different schools to deliver dyslexia instruction. Additional funding for teachers to get trained in dyslexia instruction would ensure that students receive the Tier 3 explicit instruction. Questions, additions?
What do you mean by infancy dyslexia departments in the background?
Mhm. Amy, before it became into law that all school districts had to screen kinder and first grade students, there were very few students that were diagnosed with dyslexia because it wasn't something that school districts were looking into. So those school districts that had very few students that had been diagnosed with dyslexia are at a loss of what programs to use. So, I mean, I want to say that I looked online and I spoke to several people in different school districts, and I'll give you an example. Denton ISD, I looked at the website, and if I was a parent, I would want to send my student there. Or if I was a student with dyslexia, I would want to go there because everything that I need to know is there. So I know that their program, dyslexia program, is not in the infancy, it's actually in a good stage. But then you also look at school districts, and I'm not even going to say the ones that I called. They're in infancy programs because they didn't start diagnosing students until it became law. So if they don't really know what direction to take, and that's a problem because when you have a school district using a web-based program that is kind of AI, instead of
Yeah.
teacher explicit instruction, which is what the handbook recommends, which is what ALTA, the Dyslexia Association, International Dyslexia Association, recommends for direct explicit instruction. And if it's not there, it's an infancy program. So that's why it's imperative
Okay.
that a list be approved, or at least giving some guidance to see, okay, this is an approved program. And believe me, there's classes that are extremely large, and in the programs are so if you look online, all the programs are going to say great for dyslexia, but it misses a component of what the instruction should be in the classroom.
Okay. Okay. Funding.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I think that would be me. Let me just download something. Okay. For some reason, I'm not able to share my screen.
you could email it to me and I could share it for you.
Okay, let me share that with you, Amy. Thank you very much, Amy. Okay, I sent you the link. I appreciate your help with this.
Okay. Can you see your document now?
Yes, thank you, Amy. Really appreciate that. So I want to thank Aaron, Janie, and Amy for helping me with this. I believe we met twice for this. So the first recommendation had to do with salaries. Let me get to my notes here. So with this, at a time when most school districts are struggling with teacher retention issues, it is even more difficult to retain special education teachers. I'm not going to read through the statistics, but Amy, if you can scroll down to the next paragraph down. There we go. So the committee understands the complexities associated with school funding, but we feel strongly that our most vulnerable students are greatly affected by teacher attrition. The state of Texas has a need for more special education teachers, and we need to retain the ones we have. One idea to address this issue is to offer a partial loan forgiveness program for every 5 years of service as a full-time special education teacher in Texas public schools. Many teachers are now graduating with loan debt. A loan forgiveness program will certainly incentivize teachers to remain in the job. Another idea is to have the state provide funds that will be used specifically for salary stipends for special education teachers. School districts provide many stipends to a variety of employees. Given the responsibilities and duties that special education teachers encounter on a daily basis, it is imperative that we consider providing school districts funding for these stipends. And these stipends vary greatly throughout the state of Texas if they're given one. Amy, if you can go down to the next page. So the next one has to do with the cost of FIEs. You know, a lot of times school districts are required to go through the whole evaluation, but we're not being reimbursed for the evaluation. And these cost approximately between $1,500 and $2,000 per evaluation. If you can scroll down a little bit more, Amy. Thank you. So we're asking the state to help with the funding for these evaluations. Sometimes these students that go through the evaluation do not end up being students who that need special education services, but yet we do spend the time and the money to get the FIE completed. And that's the reason for this. Amy, if you can scroll down to the next page. We go through the third recommendation is just medical billing transparency. And I know SHARS is a touchy issue right now with less funding coming to schools, but we do think that we need a little bit more transparency with how much SHARS reimbursements the school districts are receiving. So we put there in the last sentence, although parental notice and consent are required prior to requesting any reimbursements, schools are not currently required to present information about their SHARS reimbursements at any public meetings or notify parents about the exact services that are being billed. So we'd like for for the state to say something about how much the school districts are receiving. And those are the three recommendations. Any questions or comments?
I know that we didn't bullet out the recommendation versus the background. Is there anything that we would like to pull out to highlight as the recommendation itself before the formatting committee meets? Or do you think we're good in this format?
I'm open to suggestions. I was not sure about the exact format that the committee wanted.
Especially with recommendation number 3, it's hard to tell what the recommendation actually is.
Okay,
So what are we requesting with number 3? We're requesting that exact information about charge reimbursement be publicly available, or
exactly, and I should have worded that differently. So I can go back in there today and separate the recommendation from the background.
okay,
And just go with what everybody else has been presenting. I'll do that today.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we have justice, which would be me. Okay. For this one, we didn't have particular background yet, but we can do that as a group right now. You all have suggestions. First one, we recommend that the state legislature gather data on student interaction with the justice system while receiving special education services. We recommend that TEA gather data about how many students on behavior intervention plans via their IEP eventually move to a disciplinary alternative education placement, and how many of those end in a placement in the judicial system. We recommend that the state legislature request data about whether or not students served under IDEA within the Texas judicial system are receiving their special education supports while incarcerated. we recommend that the state legislature request data regarding the return to school process for previously incarcerated students, either receiving or eligible but not yet receiving special education services. And we recommend the state legislature request data regarding how many individuals within the Texas prison system were missed under child fine during the years of the special education cap. Additionally, we request a plan be created with TEA to identify these individuals and offer them appropriate compensatory services. So, does anyone have questions about what we have so far, or suggestions or what to write in the background?
I have a question, I think, about the fifth one on the students missed during the cap.
Right.
Just maybe the timeline of that, and or what would be the identifier? Is that like students who are now in special ed? Like, how would you, if they weren't in sped, how will we know they were missed?
If they ended up with a diagnosis of what would have been an eligibility category that they would have gotten during their school years.
So that have
Um,
since been identified in the system.
Right.
I don't know the answer to this, and Stephanie, I don't know, maybe there's information, since districts were required to do that, wouldn't the JJs and things that fell under TEA have been required to do that as well during that time?
Yes. So that would be sort of a tangle to figure out who would be responsible for compensatory services. But it is not the charge of this committee to make
Yeah.
the plan or implement it.
Yeah, no, that
Just
wasn't
know that it needs to be done.
the figuring out the compensatory wasn't the part I was thinking. The part I was wondering is if this procedure had already been done, just because I know that certain JJs fall under the privy of TEA, and I was just wondering if they were charged with already doing this like the school districts were over the past couple years, or if they fell outside of that requirement.
As far as I know, they have not fallen inside the requirement. But again, that's why we're requesting data, because we don't know whether it's been implemented or not. So at the very least, we're requesting that TEA tell us, how is this being implemented? Any suggestions on background for this one?
Amy, do we know if any other state gathers this type of data?
I know there's some national groups that are working towards justice issues, but I don't know if individual states have been gathering this.
Just, that was just my recommendation, just to see if any other states gather this type
Yeah.
of data.
And put that in our background information.
To use as a model.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, health and safety. Okay. So we have heard in previous meetings about public comment on fire safety. So we wrote some health and safety recommendations. We said, we recommend that fire safety for people with disabilities become a priority for TEA and legislators. Gather and evaluate data regarding how many students in each LEA would not be able to use stairs in the event of a school emergency evacuation. Gather and evaluate data regarding existence and implementation of safety plans for emergency evacuations that includes students and staff with disabilities as focus. Determine whether people with disabilities are included in live evacuation drills with the rest of the school community. Encourage LEAs to develop and implement safety plans for students whose disabilities may impact their safety and ability to evacuate during emergencies. A possible approach may be to develop a supplement to IEP plans similar to supplements for other disabilities, such as autism and visual impairment. Possible language for this exists from a House bill from the legislative session. Explore the feasibility of a separate funding stream for emergency evacuation equipment, etc., that is not tied to either student-specific funding or funding that would otherwise be used in direct education of students, neither special education funding nor general ed funding. We recommend that school-wide epilepsy procedures be developed and shared with all staff and interested parents, and that epilepsy safety plans be included as part of the IEP process for students with an identified need. We recommend that state legislature enact procedures for baseline minimum seizure protocols for schools statewide. In addition, we request that an additional supplement to IEP plans be created specifically to address health and safety needs of the student with direct attention to epilepsy support needs. We recommend that TEA make use of their website to post accessible, plain language information regarding epilepsy CEDAR protocols, epileptic emergencies, and what schools are required to provide. This information needs to be easy to find and understand for all who may be concerned about epilepsy, either on a campus or individual level. We encourage a continued relationship between the agency and medical and stakeholder groups, such as the Epilepsy Foundation, to ensure that information and protocols always remain up to date, clear, and culturally sensitive. We recommend that TEA and the Texas legislature require the IEP team to include an epilepsy supplement in plans for students where there is an identified need. When necessary, a student medical team may be integrated to help form or sign off on any epilepsy plans to be implemented at school or throughout a student's day. As they are able, the student should also be included to promote knowledge of their own health, their self-determination, and ultimately their safety. To achieve this, information should be available to students so that they may be able to learn about their own needs and how to speak up for themselves in regards to their care. We recommend that students be evaluated for feeding and swallowing disorders if there is either a known issue or the IEP team has concerns. Any member of the team should be encouraged to bring observations to the group. The student should be evaluated based on observations by an interdisciplinary team. A diet modification plan may be initiated at school as needed. A safety plan should be initiated to prevent and address choking and aspiration at school, to promote adequate hydration, nutrition, and safety. This will provide better attention to learning in class. The resulting information in the form of a feeding and swallowing supplement should be included in the student's IEP to be given to relevant staff. We recommend that restraint and seclusion techniques no longer be used as a disciplinary measure or classroom management technique, and instead are only used in rare situations to prevent further harm to a student or their peers. We request that TEA enforce policies requiring that positive behavior supports and intervention be used as often as possible to address incidents with students. We request that behavior intervention plans be reviewed annually with a mandatory review before alternative placements are considered. The review should be conducted as part of a manifestation determination hearing proceeding. We request mandatory training on restraint be performed by any staff member expected to be involved in the restraining of a student before they participate in an emergent situation. Training after the fact does not guarantee the safety of students or staff during the initial incident. Anyone have any questions or suggestions for background on these?
Amy, I did just drop in there the guidelines that we got in April 2024 from TEA on it's the guidelines to the multi-hazard emergency operations specifically for individuals with disabilities. So it might be a great thing to reference and pull from as well.
Okay. Stephanie, can you put that in an email to us so we don't lose it in the chat, please?
Amy, could you please share your justice work group recommendations and your safety, health and safety work group recommendations, please? This is Janie.
I can.
Thank you.
So the next thing that we have to do is decide whether we are ready to take a vote on these recommendations. Would anyone like to bring anything else up before we do that?
Hey, Amy, in the, finance one, I didn't see one related to, sign language interpreters that we had brought up in June. I'm wondering if that had been, I don't think I made it to the discussions since June on that, so I didn't know if that had been discussed and not included, or if that subcommittee was looking for someone else to provide a draft language for that.
You are right. We do need to add some draft language for that.
Give me a minute, I can throw some together.
Well, I
Amy,
mean,
it's really hard to hear Aaron. Like I have no idea what he said. I can hear you, but I cannot hear Aaron. Sorry.
Aaron was reminding us that the funding subcommittee had a request to add something about sign language interpreter funding. And that was mistakenly not included. What we should do is we have a copy of the funding recommendations. Correct? Yes, we do. So perhaps we should, well, the recommendation was to increase funding so that students have correct access to their sign language interpretation during class, correct? So what we would need to do would be just with that as the recommendation to increase funding. And we can probably use a lot of the data that we got from Randy Turner's testimony in the background, correct?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, definitely the background.
So perhaps we should say we recommend that funding for interpreters be adjusted to better reflect the market value of interpreters so that students have more access to language and the full intent of the curriculum that they are learning in order to better receive FAPE. If someone can put that in the document for us.
I can put it, something like that in chat.
Amy, I'm adding that to the finance
Yeah,
at the top.
oh, okay.
Put something. Here, I put something in chat for folks.
Okay. Can someone copy paste out of the chat into the document?
Thank you, Erin.
Janie, I'm also sending you the
Thank you.
I'm also sending you the data sheet that we're gonna put in the addendum at the end for the feeding and swallowing recommendations. anyone want to take a turn at writing some language for the background for health and safety or justice? Somebody can scribe for us while we talk about it verbally if needed.
Can you repeat that last part of what you said, Amy?
I said somebody can scribe for us if we want to talk about it verbally if needed. About something like, we've heard from several self-advocates that they felt unsafe during fire evacuations. Both for drills and live emergencies. Especially if they were power wheelchair users. Because of their tragic stories, we recommend. We may even be able to include their written testimony that they sent to us as well. And I also recommend that we use the ideas presented in Kate's testimony as part of our background, as well as the feeding and following disorders fact sheet that I have already shared with Janie.
Good morning, Amy. This is Agatha.
Hey,
Talking
I'm
about
glad you could join us.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was a little late. I wasn't able to jump on until right about 9:30. So I had an appointment and so I apologize about that. But I do think that doing so using the testimony as background, I think will be a powerful tool as opposed to us trying to gather a lot of data on it. Although I just had a question. When you said tragic outcome, has there been loss of life?
Not yet, but one of the people that we had public testimony from stated that she had been diagnosed with PTSD from her experience, which in my opinion is already tragic, but we don't need something even more tragic because we haven't addressed this.
Certainly, I agree. I just, when you said tragic, I was like, oh my gosh, because I must have come
It
on.
could be worse.
Yeah, I must have come on just after her testimony because
No,
I
her
got
testimony was the previous meeting, so I think you missed her testimony from the previous meeting.
okay. All right. Yeah, I do think that a testimony would be a good background as far as that goes.
We have two of them from last meeting. And if necessary, I will also put my story with feeding and swallowing too, because I've had feeding and swallowing issues for over 6 years, and I'm just being evaluated in the next 2 weeks. So if we need that, I will put that in there, but. So anything else that we need to look at or add to? I know we won't necessarily be able to write out quotes from testimony right now, but I think we can vote to take the recommendations as written and add testimony to background during our formatting committee. Yeah, if we get to close to noon, we can talk about taking a break. But I honestly don't think we will, because we still have an hour before noon. So yeah, so we need to make a decision about whether we can vote just on the recommendations and can add background later, or do we need to take the time to add background to a few of these before we vote? Discussion?
I'd feel comfortable voting on the recommendations. I think
Right.
the background can be added by the formatting committee, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is
I
Aaron.
support
would-
that as well.
Yeah, this is Aaron, I would agree. We're voting
I
on the
concur.
recommendations. The only thing I would say there is, I wouldn't necessarily put it on the editing committee to draft the background content.
Yeah,
I think that they can edit what is provided by the subcommittees
right.
and then include that as part of it. But the background and conclusion sections are inherently informative, not the actual, content of the recommendation themselves. So
I agree. I agree with that. So definitely.
Some of the ones we already have the background. So do we want to have the subcommittees email them, or do we want to talk about the one or two that we still have to write a background of as a bigger group right now? Or do we just want to vote on the recommendations?
I'd say that the subcommittees should email them. Maybe we can establish a deadline for that, but I think we're voting on the recommendations for sure.
Okay. Stephanie, that leads me to a question. When do you need everything to be done with the backgrounds and the end of the editing committee?
Well, I need your report, right? I would
Yeah.
say before Thanksgiving, so the week of November 18th.
Okay, so let's take. So let's take maybe September for the subcommittees to meet again to get their background solidified, those of us that need to. And then October, the editing committee will meet. And then we will get it to you in November. Does that work?
Yeah, and that gives me time to submit it, and then if they need any changes, to return it to you guys and make those changes. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, what is our procedure for voting on the recommendations?
I can make, I don't know if we need a motion, but I can make a motion that we accept the recommendations as presented today.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do
Aye.
we need a roll
Aye.
call vote on this, Stephanie? Yeah,
I'm sorry, what What,
I
Amy?
think because because we're hybrid, I think we need a roll call vote.
Okay. I can just go down the list.
Yeah,
All right,
do we want to do it by subcommittee or as a total?
I think we can just do it as a total. I mean, it's your call, it's your meeting, but I don't have a list of everybody by subcommittees.
Okay. So that'll work. We'll
Okay,
do it as a whole.
okay. So April, what is your vote? Okay, she put it in chat. Yeah, she agrees. Tara,
Agree.
okay, Adrian,
Yes, I agree.
Janie,
I agree.
Marissa. Marissa, you're on mute. Are you gonna drop it in chat? Marissa put it in chat. She agrees. Aaron says motion to accept all policy recommendations presented and discussed this morning, so he agrees. That's in chat. Amy, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, Lori,
Agree?
okay. Diana,
Agree.
thank you. Susan,
I agree.
okay, and Cheryl,
I agree.
and Agatha.
I agree.
Okay, that's everybody.
Congratulations. We have unanimously accepted our recommendations for this year's legislative report. So the next piece of our agenda is to maybe we should establish, well, okay, so the next piece of our agenda is to establish our next meeting date. It may be helpful to establish when our subcommittees are responsible for getting back to us on their background statements and when the formatting committee is meeting. So our finish line for our background needs to be sometime in September. So should we pick a Friday maybe to have that back in September? Let me look at a calendar. So something like the end of the day, the 27th. Maybe you should have.
How
your
long would
back-
the meeting be?
No, that's not necessarily a meeting. That's just your work groups should be done with writing that and send it to Stephanie by the 27th.
September
Thank you.
27th or August?
September. And then y'all can set your own meetings for when you want to meet before that happens. But that would be the timing by which you'd have to get everything to us.
Okay, Amy, can you tell me again what day that meeting is going to be and the purpose for the meeting?
It wouldn't necessarily be a meeting. It would just be when you have to get everything to Stephanie as subcommittees, so that we can have everything ready to go to the formatting committee. And then the formatting committee would meet in October. And then we'd have everything to Stephanie by November.
So Amy, help me understand a little bit. The subcommittees are gonna email their reports to me, and what do you want me to do with that?
Collect them all and make sure you have everybody's, so you can send it to the formatting committee.
I don't, okay, are you gonna tell me who the formatting committee is?
The formatting committee is, let me look at my list. The formatting committee is,
I think it's Erin, Amy, and Agatha.
yep,
Okay,
So you want Amy, this is Agatha again. You want a deadline of September 27th for all the subcommittees to send their background and recommendations, conclusions to the formatting committee, or
yeah,
to the
to
CAC,
Stephanie, so that
to
Stephanie can,
Stephanie, and then Stephanie will forward that to us, and then we'll have our
then-
meeting in October.
yeah, right.
Are you thinking of us having a meeting as far as a committee meeting sometime in November before we turn in
Correct.
our report to
Yes,
TA? Okay.
right, a final meeting as we turn that into Stephanie. So that would be in early November,
And that would be our final meeting of the year.
right?
I'm sorry, do we need to decide on a date for the next meeting?
Yeah, for the early November one, yes, we
Okay.
do.
Would November 12th work?
well, in looking at November's calendar, I can tell you that the week of the 11th, I'm not available. And then for consideration for ESC 13 and their availability, I don't know, April, do ESCs usually close more than a week for Thanksgiving, or it just varies by E ESC?
Usually just varies, but most of them, I mean, they're closed that week or just that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay, all right, so maybe it will be better the first week in November, the week of the 4th, one of those days. And then if you want to try the week of the 18th, I can reach out to the point of contact at Region 13 to see if they're open and if they have any availability.
Can I suggest November 7th? That's a Thursday.
That works for me.
I can make that work.
I can as well.
I'm okay for that day.
Do we need to make a motion to accept for that?
Well, first we need to make sure that that's available here.
Okay.
I am not available that morning. I could do the afternoon, but I'm not available that morning.
I'm okay with 6, 7, and 8 of that week, by the way.
I could do that if needed, but Thursday is better.
I could also make the 6th, 7th, and 8th work, but I would say Wednesday is better. But not off the table.
I like Wednesday, also the 6th, but I'm available any day. So but I prefer the 6th also, which is the Wednesday.
Okay.
I am not available on the 6th, sorry, but the 7th or 8th would work.
Does the 8th work for everyone?
I'm good with the 8th, that Friday.
The 8th works for me as well.
Is there anybody with a conflict on the 8th?
I usually, that's usually my crazy day for hospital admission, so I can say yes now, but you know, it might be a last minute kind of not be able to.
I'm good any day except Mondays. Mondays are really hard for me. So any other day.
Like 8 is perfect, but it's.
Mhm.
So Amy, what do you want me to submit to Region 13 for a first preference?
How about? How about the first preference? We do. The 8th, since most people can do the 8th. And then the other two.
I can make that work.
Okay. Okay, I've emailed my point of contact and sometimes she's able to get back to me right away, sometimes not. So if you just want to move on with your next item, if I hear back, I'll let you know.
Okay. Are our next item is to add things to the agenda for next meeting. Which would be to hear back from the formatting committee and do a final review of the report. Is there anything else that we need to add to the agenda?
I can't really think of anything. Do we want to just kind of keep that meeting about finalizing the report? That way, if maybe some of the people that are having a harder time making it, we can keep it short and sweet for them.
Yeah, I know that Kristen wanted to give us an update on SHARS and possibly have someone from Health and Human Services come talk to us. But we can always have that as we start next year, because with that, we won't have time to put that in the report anyways after this meeting.
Okay,
So-
so what I'm hearing you say is that on the agenda, we don't want any TEA updates, is that correct?
Aaron has a point to say, so I'm gonna let him talk.
Okay,
before
sure.
I answer that.
So in June, something came up about the results-driven accountability, and I think that's what that stands for. And I was asking Stephanie if there's sort of a Cliff Notes version. I think my question is, the schools and the school districts get a grade. And I'm curious if there's and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that's not sure how it is, but my question generally is, what's the sort of the Cliff Notes version of how special education is measured, and how those measurements, or if those measurements get used in kind of the grading process? If that's sort of the kind of the big news making thing about school districts and schools and stuff like that. If or how special education factors into that. So,
Aaron, for the RDA, there's specific measures, and those are publicly available reports.
okay. And maybe this is me, I just didn't follow that for folks that maybe live and breathe this is old news, but if there's something that would be better done just offline to educate me on that, I'm fine with that. If there's a general need, committee-wide need for just how those dots get connected, then that would be good to do it in committee meeting, as I said, if that's more of a kind of a just for me, I'm happy to feel anything other than I'm not terribly interested in reading like the rule book on that, the actual statutes and manuals and things like that. But if there's a Cliff Notes version that somebody has already, I'm happy to take that offline.
If I find something, I'll send it over, definitely.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. But the reports are pretty much easy to read through and understand.
Yeah,
But
Aaron,
yes,
I can send you the links to the reports if you want to read through the reports. I can do that.
I might have ChatGPT summarize it for me. Mostly, I'm more interested in what is how those get reflected in I mean, my first question is, does anything to do with special education get reflected in those grades? And then if there is, then, what is the size of that impact with us? And less about the minutia. So maybe that's where we can start.
So we're giving determination levels by the state of Texas for those RDA reports. And depending on the determination level that you get, there's some follow-up activities that you must be doing as a school district. If you get a 2 or 3 or 4, then you have some special projects that you've got to do with TEA and meetings that you get depending on the determination level.
Okay, so that's diagnostic. I'm just more, I guess my question is more of a, what you see in the news is this school district got this grade or this school got that grade. Like, is special education factored into that? Yes or no?
I see. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
talking
and just
about
a quick, I was gonna say, just a quick click notes on that. If you look at the A's, there's a categories, there's like 4, there's categories, and one of the categories is closing the gaps. And that is the achievement of their special ed students,
Okay,
based off of progress that they've made, from year to year in their performance on the state testing. And then it's also broken down by like at-risk categories as well. So like how like the minorities or at-risk students in different categories are. So there is a separate delineation just in the A through F that addresses the special ed testing. But it's all star related on that category. And then there's also a category in on the graduation rates as far as like graduation and dropout for SPED, and then CTE
okay.
credits. There's an indication there where they have to represent their SPED numbers and in participating in like the CTE. So there is just I mean that we could, I think it might be nice if everybody's interested to have just a brief overview of how that interplays, but just a quick answer to your question. SPED is represented in the A through the A through F. And then they get a indication on the front of their reports of the district that says if they met standard or not for special education. And that's usually in relation to their compliance, like if they met their SPP timelines and things like that, where they made their evaluations on time. There's a quick notation at the front of districts that says whether or not they met standard for their special education compliance part as well.
Yeah, RDA just goes into more detail than what's included in the A through F accountability ratings. I have heard in the past year or two that the RDA will factor into the A through F rating at some point.
So, Adrian, based on what you just said, it sounds like it does not currently, but might in the future.
Parts of it do, but not the entire thing. Parts of it.
Okay.
There's
Some do.
98 indicators in the RDA, and it breaks down every indicator from SPED, from how each kid group does on STAR, how they're disciplined, how much they're involved in the inclusive settings and not. So those 98 indicators are a separate report right now. And I think that there is hope that they're eventually more embossed into the system. So they started a system this year to move parts of it over into the accountability system.
It sounds like there's some work going on about determining that.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's going to make the campuses a lot more accountable for special ed. So I think that's a good move by the state.
All right, so probably not worth wasting the committee's time remediating Aaron on this stuff, but if there is something in the works that may change what gets counted, how it gets counted, those sorts of things, that's still in process. Sounds like there's people who are much more in tune with that, but at some point it'd probably be useful for the committee to know what those changes, what are the proposed changes, what's the discussion around those changes. And I don't know if that's necessarily a November timeline, but probably at some point we probably need to get up to speed as a committee about how that's going, so before things become kind of a done deal.
Yeah, if we hear anything, we'll let you all know so that we can put an agenda item.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay,
So Agatha, if I'm hearing you right, does that mean we want Kristen to come update us on SHARS and how they're working with HHSC in our February meeting?
I mean, really, your chair, that's up to you. I was thinking, because I know that oftentimes, and Stephanie would be able to tell us, but I know a lot of, oftentimes in our February meetings, we have a lot of new members because people drop off and people come on. And then, of course, we have we vote for new officers in February. So I was just, it's really up to you. I was just thinking that we could wrap up one thing before we start another. Although if the SHARS thing is really important, and if that's the only time that Kristen can do it, then absolutely, let's hear from her.
So perhaps we should put both tentatively on the agenda until we talk to Kristen and see when she's available. And then we can always move it to February if she's amenable to doing either one.
well, I can tell you that there's some things going on in the legislature that will come out in October.
Right.
That's what I've heard her say, so I don't know. It's totally up to you.
Right, let's go ahead and put it on the agenda and then we can talk to her as it gets closer and see if she wants to push it back if things aren't finalized as well as we think they're going to be in October.
Okay. Anything else you want to put on the agenda? Amy?
No, I think that's good.
Okay,
Um,
so then do you want to review the minutes and approve the minutes?
Yes. Janie, are you ready?
Yes, just how can I share? That's hold on. Mm, oh, share screen. Okay. There you go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the CAC attendees, Catherine Harwood, she made a public comment, so she's not a member, so wouldn't go up there.
Okay, Catherine. Thank you.
Yeah, and then Kristen McGuire is with TEA, so she wouldn't go up there. Okay.
Okay, yes, I did put it in.
And Joanne's name is Joanne Wolfberg, not Garza.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do I continue going up?
Catherine's name is spelled with a C. Are we ready to scroll down?
FIIE, that's an acronym. What's the actual wording?
Full individual evaluations. Initial evaluations, I'm sorry.
Do I keep scrolling down?
Yeah, it should be November 8th, not November 7th.
So it's gonna be Friday?
Yeah. Aaron has made a motion to accept the minutes.
I second.
Our second is Lori.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Janie, is there a part in there where we voted on the recommendations?
Yeah, you're right.
Oh,
Yeah, I think we're missing that.
okay,
Yeah.
that's right. That was right before the reports. CAC members voted to approve recommendations.
Yes.
When, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe that was a unanimous one.
Mhm.
Yes.
And if you need further detail, I think I made the motion. I don't remember who made the second.
We did a roll call and everybody agreed.
Yeah, I remember making the motion, somebody seconded, and then we made a roll call.
It's me, Lori, I did it.
Okay, perfect. Lori did that. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
So do we need to redo our motions to approve the minutes because we edited it?
Is there anybody to Adrian that I motion to approve recommendations during Valentine King? Sure.
Do we need a roll call to adjourn?
We, we might need a roll call vote to approve the minutes. I don't think we've done that.
Yeah.
So do you want me to do the roll call, Amy?
Yes, to approve the minutes.
Okay, roll call to approve the minutes. April,
Approved.
Tara,
Approved.
Adrian,
Yes, I agree. Yes, approved.
Janie,
Approve.
Marissa. She may have dropped off. Aaron,
Aye.
Amy,
Approved?
Lori,
Approve.
Diana,
Approve.
Susan,
Approve.
Cheryl.
Marissa put her vote in the chat.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl, let's see, not checking the chat. Agatha,
Approved.
okay. There you go.
No, it's Aaron. Wait, it's Adrian Guerra, motion to approve the minutes, not Aaron.
I believe Aaron was the one who motioned to approve the minutes.
Karen?
Aaron
Okay,
Banger.
sorry, that's right.
Banger.
Karen Banger. GOR, motion to approve minutes.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Hey,
I move
Amy,
to
real quick,
approve.
I'm sorry, this is Agatha. Did we find out if November 8th is the date of our next meeting for sure with the location?
Yeah, I haven't heard back, so if the 8th is not available, then we'll go to the 6th, and if that's not available, we'll go to the 7th. So I'll send out a Zoom invitation to everybody and a calendar invite. Usually they have availability, but I can't speak on their behalf.
Should the minutes just reflect that it's a tentative date? And
Yeah.
oh, it says, sorry, it says tentative.
tentative.
Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I second. This is Tara.
Okay, who made the motion?
It was April.
Okay. Well, thank you for a very productive meeting. And I will see some of you in October and all of you in November.